So on here, we're evaluating logical statements using and, ors, and nots, and this if statement. And when it's asking us, it's saying, given that a equals 10, so a is being set to 10, and the variable b is being set to 4, we have to evaluate each of these to say whether x is true or false. And so if we can have a look here at this if statement, where first bit is going to be is a, what does that symbol mean? Less than or equal to, thank you. Recorded for posterity, no worries. It's less than or equal to 7. Now what was a? 10. Is 10 less than or equal to 7? No. And we'll say, because we're using logic, we'll say false. And I'm lazy, so I'll write F. F for false. Now, since it's an and statement, do we need to evaluate the right-hand side to figure out what's happening? No, because it's false. False on an and statement, the only way it's going to be true is if both sides are true. So as soon as one side's false, it means that it's going to be false overall. But hey, we're here, why don't we do it? B, what does that symbol mean? B was 4. So is 4 greater than 4? No. So that will also be... So, no, well, false and false in this case. Still false. So will we run this bit of code here? No. We only run this bit of code here if this was true, which is not. Therefore, we skip down to the... And therefore, x in this case will be... Beautiful. So, let's quickly evaluate how these are going to work. So we're going to do the same thing we did before, except bear in mind that a is now 7 and b is 6. On this one here, is a less than or equal to 7? Yes. So we got true. And on the other side, is b greater than 4? Yes. True and true means that x would be true in this case. Next one down here. Is a greater than 7? No. A is 7, so it can't be greater than, so there'll be false there. In an or, if I've got false or something, does it tell me anything useful? No. If it was true, then it would mean that the whole thing must be true, but in this case it's false, therefore we need to evaluate the other side. B, is it equal to 1? False. Therefore false. This one here, there were some great conversations, and it's really important we have this actually about where does the not work? Yeah, that's a great question. And so let's first of all evaluate this one here. Is A larger than B? Well, A is 7, B is 6, so the answer would be true. Now, the way the not's going to work, do you see there's the not here and then there's this bracket here and here. So the not will apply, hopefully this will work for me, to this bit here. That'll be the not bit. So it will just apply to that one there. To make this clearer, if the not was here outside the bracket, it would apply to here to here. So then it would apply to everything. So when you're looking at nots and where they apply, the question is, what are they next to? Or, indeed, if there was a bracket here and here, then it would apply to all of it. Clear? Yeah. So in this context, it would be not, what have we got? Not true, so therefore it would be false. Oh, let's get a bit messy. False doesn't tell us anything with an or, but with the other side, is B less than or equal to 7? So 6 is less than or equal to 7. So true, false or true gives you true. So it would be true. Part of what I want us to talk about here is I want us to be able to look at a problem like this, and I'm trying to give you some tools about how to think about it. So I want you to think about these things. I want you to think about what variables you can see, so what I'm going to store, what commands that we're going to be running, what sort of things, actions we need to have happen, and then what values we need to use. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to highlight in green anything where I see a variable. I'm going to highlight in blue anywhere I think it's command, an action to do something, like a process, and anything in red where it's like values I need to work with. So let's have a read through here. I ask a user to input their grade. I'm not going to highlight it yet. I'll read it through first, which is a percentage. The acceptable range is from 0 to 100, right? Because it's a percentage. If the score is higher or lower than that range, I need to output a message to say, nope, reject it. Otherwise, tell them the score has been accepted. It's called validation, where I reject things. So if somebody types in 110%, is that acceptable? I should reject it and give the message. If they type in 50, it is acceptable. Let's do this. I'm looking for variables. Do we see anywhere where we could see a variable? Someone that's going to store something.
Grade.
Great, I totally agree with you. So I'm going to highlight that in green. Any other variables? This is a bit annoying because it says if the score is higher or lower, by that it means the grade. I want to say it. I wrote this, so sorry about that. Okay, what about commands? To actions to do things. Do we see?
Yeah, ask a user.
Totally. Asking a user, that's a command, isn't it? In fact, that's going to be asking it, and then they need to input. Yeah, with you. And then the acceptable range is from 0 to 100. If the score is higher or lower, so if the score is higher or lower, that's an action, then we output a message to reject. That's a command, isn't it? Otherwise, so the score has been accepted. What values do we need to, are there any values we need to act on? I'm not saying that's revolutionised it, but when you look at these problems, what you want to try and do is break it down what you've been asked to do. So it's trying to look at this idea and go, okay, where am I going to need to use a variable? What actions do I need? What values am I going to take? It's a little tool, it's computational thinking to break it down. That's kind of abstracting the useful information and removing that which I don't need. So now I need to think about chronology, like what has to happen first? And luckily, I think that first statement there has to happen first. So what do I need to do?
User input.
So to ask a user input's how they're going to input it, but remember it's a conversation, so I need to do what first? So I need output, so I'm going to do that. I've got there, my first line here, I'm outputting to the end user, what is your grade? What does the end user need to do? So grade, that's the variable I'm using to store it. I completely agree with you, so grade. Arrow pointing towards it means that what's the word begins with A? I'm assigning. Guys, this is like music to my ears. I'm going to play this back and be like, awesome. No editing needed. What's the command? That's right, Amir. Spot on. User input. You were spot on, Rob. Exactly. So we need to check if this grade is higher or lower than 100. Or sorry, we have to check the 0 to 100 range. What function am I going to do to do it? If. Completely agree with you. So if. Now, here's where the trick. You can either check for the acceptable range and include it, or you can look for things outside the range and exclude it. So you can either say, I'm looking for numbers between 0 and 100, and say, I'll have that. Or you can say, I'm looking for numbers which are lower than 0 and above 100, and reject it. Exactly. No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, good. Right. So which are we going to do? I mean, they're kind of. Should we say we're looking for it? Should we say we'll say the ones we're looking for? That seems more logically. So if grade is what then? So what we're looking for? I'm gonna. You know what I'm gonna do?
Sorry, so I've got Aaron.
The conversation was, is grade greater than a 0? And then somebody picked it up and was like, wait a minute. If I just say greater than 0, if somebody types in 0, is it greater than 0? Yeah, so exactly. So we need, this is when the number, the kind of the keyword is inclusive of 0 to 100. So it could be 0. So therefore we need to say it's greater than or equal. There you go. And then what else are we checking about the grade? So less than or equal to. Yeah, so there's two different ways you can, I'm doing this because I need to link these together and have a quick conversation about it. What you could do is you could say if grade is equal to 0, then, and then do inside it if grade is greater than 100. So you could, because then you'd have to get both of these to be correct to get down there. You could do that. Now, right, so let's explore this. So if I put or here, because the question's going to be, there's either a join that's going to be an or join or an and join. And it's so easy to get it wrong. It really is. And here's how you then test it. You do it by testing it, by putting some sample values in. So what's an acceptable number? Is 5 an acceptable number? Yeah. Is 5 greater than or equal to 0? Yeah. So that would be true. I don't need to evaluate this side. It was going to work. Yeah? What happened about minus 5? So is minus 5, we should not have it. So is minus 5 greater than or equal to 0? False. Is minus 5 less than or equal to 100? Yeah. True. So false or true is going to give you true. Unfortunately, there's not a single number that won't be true for. Because any number that's greater than or equal to 0 is that one. It's so easily done, so easily done. So or is not going to work for us. So what we're going to use? There you go. Now, if you were rejecting it, if you were doing it the other way around, you would say if grade is less than 0 or grade is above 100. So you would use an or that way. But this one, because you're saying what's inside it. Oh, and then what? What do we need to do? Output. Grade accepted could be the message we use. I finished. There you go. And then, do we need a command to do the else bit, or is it just whatever's left? So what's the command we're going to use? So what are we going to say then? Else.
Grade rejected.
There you go. Point something out. Do you note that when I write the if, the output, I do it inside here? Do I do that by accident? No, that is deliberate. It makes it easier to read your code. It's a good bit of programming practice. What's it called? Indenting. Yeah, indentation is the process, but indenting is what we're calling it. And indenting makes it much easier to read. And if I put another if statement inside it, I'd also indent that. And then that's called nesting, in fact. This one, I'm not asking you to write out a whole bit of code. This is kind of exam questions you can get. When it's asking you to rewrite a programming structure that exists. So in here, Aaron, can you please take the headphones out of your ears, please, yeah? Thank you, Aaron. On here it's saying, write an if statement using and, or not. This is terrible English, my apologies. Again, whoever wrote this. There you go. Which involves you having to rewrite this ifs and else statement, but using and ors. And it's asking you that instead of using two if statements, you just write it all on one line of if statements. So the way it works here is that if statement's nesting inside. To get to picnic equals yes, you have to say that day is sunny would have to be true, and, which is a bit of a hint, temperature would have to be greater than 20 to get here. I want you to rewrite this line so it's just using one if statement and an or not to join it up, okay? I'll give you a couple of minutes. So let's have a quick look at trying to solve this problem then. So what we'll do is we'll take this original statement here, and that'll be the first section we want to include. So the first section is we've got that statement there, and we're doing the same test. But then we're saying we also, to get to this line, that has to be true, and this line. So the join's going to be a and. I see, I was clearly very subtle how I did it, so that was wonderful. And what was the other one? And, oh, sugar, I've got rid of it now. Temperature. Thank you, guys. Is greater than 20. And you see now you've managed to do it on the same line. Question while I'm doing this. What's better? Is it better to do it like this, so it's all on one line, or is it to do it nested? It's tricky. Do you know, there's not a right or a wrong. Does it have the same outcome? Does it achieve the same thing? Yeah. It's all about what's going to be easier for you to understand yourself, i.e. that you do the right thing. Difference
between simplicity or saving like 2 lines of code.
Indeed. And I've been in a situation like this, I probably would do it one line of code, but I've used that logic to really make my life difficult, because I've used like maybe 7 or 8 ands on ors on one line with knots and stuff, and then at the time I'm doing it, it makes sense, and then I've made a mistake, and then I'm trying to debug it, and I'm going, oh God, right? And actually then if you have it on multiple lines, it makes it easier to debug, because then you've got it separated out a little bit. In fact, when we have a complex idea and we break it down, we call it decomposition. Indeed. And so I should practice as I preach rather than not. Do I need to do the rest? I think we're quite clear, yeah? As I'm writing the word yes.
Yes.
So here would be an end if. Fantastic. So recording now, I'm going to use the same thing I tried to do of identifying variables, identifying commands or actions I need to do, and values. So let's have a read through. I invite a user to enter a number, n. I output n numbers of random values between 1 and 10. And this often happens in exams. You're then given this as an example. So this is a function called random int. You supply the number 1 and 10 as parameter values. And what do you reckon it does? between 1 and 10. So it could give you 6 back or 7 back. If I give it a random number between 5 and 100, it will do what, Abdali? Now I'm looking for variables. Where do we see some variables? N, totally. And I think N is actually our only variable realistically here. What actions do you see? Invite a user. So that's going to have the output, and we're going to need the input for them to input the N. Output, the number of random values between 100, yeah. Any variable, any values we need to pay attention to? Yeah, the 1 and 10. So, now do you remember with iteration, with loops, there was 2 families. What were the 2 families? Definite and indefinite. Definite is when you know, so it's like going around 10 times or 20 times. Dong, what do you reckon? I've invited the user to enter a number, so they put in 6. It's then going to give you 6 random numbers. I invite the user to enter a number, they enter 11. It gives me 11 random numbers. Definite iteration or indefinite? What do you reckon? So indefinite is when you don't know how many times it's going to go around. Definite. I reckon it's definite iteration because if they say 6, how many times is it going to go around? 6. So what do we do for a definite for loop? So we'll put a 4, so it'll be 4. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, yeah. So chronologically, first thing we need to do, output, and what's the question? Enter number of random numbers you want, or something. All right, go square it. Okay, guys. So, if it is definite iteration, because we are going to take in how many random numbers, we're going to use a for loop. But before I do that, I need to do something. What do I need to do? I've asked the person for. And what's the variable? On here, it just said n, doesn't it? So, n it is. N. I want to assign it a value, so I'll arrow pointing towards it, and then user input. Okay, so we've got n. We're going to use, what loop did we say we're going to use? A definite loop, so we'll use a for loop for that. So for, and we're going to need something, we need a variable to count with right now. So I could say C for count, or I could just use the word count. Maybe I just use the word count, keep it simple. So I'll use a count. Now, here's the thing. We want it to start at value, and we want to go up to what? Yes, we want it to go up to n. So what number do we start at?
0.
I'm so glad you all said 0, because you're wrong, but this is going to be an awesome opportunity to explain why. Okay? I know that seems cruel. That seems cruel, doesn't it? So, right. So the reason why I think you guys said 0 is because when we were doing arrays, the first box of the array is at position 0. So we'll often do that for arrays. But in this time, I want you to think for a second. I'll pause it. I'll ask you the question, then pause. If I do 0 to n, where would it go wrong for us? What's going to be our logical error? Thank you, Karen. That's completely spot on. If you start at 0 and you go up to n, and assuming you added in 10, it's going to do 1 extra. So it'll give you 11 values. If you put in 5, it'll go from 0 to 5. So it'll give you 6 values. So that's exactly right. And there's 2 ways you could fix it. One way is you could go n minus 1. Or, and I think I probably will do it for this one around, you can just change 0 to 1. There you go. This loop is going to go around n number of times. And what we want to repeat is this random number. We want to have a random number between 1 and 10. And so that's actually a subroutine. We can, what do we say when I want to get a subroutine? I call it. That's exactly right. I'll call it. So I'll call it. So I'll say, I'm actually going to, because I'll need to put some additional stuff here. I'm going to put it out here somewhere, okay? So I'm going to say the name of the subroutine, so random int. So when we call a subroutine, often we need to send it some values. So these values here, do you remember what these are called? The values that get sent begins with P? Parameter values. And so in this case, what do we need to send it? Because we want to do between 1 and 10. We actually will do 1 and 10 in this case, because we actually do want to send a value between 1 and 10. If we wanted to do between 1 and 20, we could send it 1 and 20. Okay, now that's going to generate the value. The reason I've left some space here is because what does it say you want to do? You want to... Right. So in here, I'm going to put the command to output. I've got that command to output, and I want to say it's all this stuff here. So what I'll do is I'll put some brackets around it so it knows it's outputting that value. So it's just going to print out these random values. Am I finished?
No.
N4. A little bit of tidying up. Absolutely. Yeah, go for it. Guys, if you remember, I said that there's two parts. There's computational thinking and then there's writing the code. And a lot of computational thinking is being able to read text like this and make sense of it. And do you remember what I was doing? A little tip. I highlighted in green if I saw a variable. I highlighted in blue if it was like an action of some kind. And then red were like values I needed. So I'm going to do that when I go around. Invite a user to enter a low number and a high number. So where's the action? Invite, completely with you. So inviting a user. Where's the, there's some variables there. What are the variables? Yeah, lower number and higher number. I'm with you. For a range of numbers. For instance, you can input 1 for lower and 100 for higher. And then return how many numbers that are both divisible by 3 and 5. And it'll be a good opportunity to do a little teach. But where's the action? Returning how many numbers that are both divisible by 3 and 5. And they're kind of the values I kind of need. 3. Oh yeah, and, yes. So this is just going to be a little practice for us. We've not done it for a little while, looking how the 3 different divisions work. So slash was a real division. So it's a number that's going to have a decimal place or potentially have a decimal place. Div, integer division, mod, the remainder, and see how we get on. So let's review. So 9 divided by 4, so that's integer division. The answer would be 2.25 would be exactly right.
Well done, Rob.
When we're coming down to integer division, what's going to happen to this section here? What's going to happen to this bit?
Truncated.
It's going to get cut off, isn't it? So even if it was 2.99, what would happen to it? 2. Chopped off. It would still be 2. Good. I want you to remember that. And then mod, it's what's left over. So 4 goes into 9 twice, giving us 1 remainder. Perfect. So that's how we're using it. And if you remember, the question said, look at a number and figure out whether it can be divided by 5 or divided by 3. So let's just take a moment to think about what kind of numbers this could be. I often think it's really useful to think of concrete examples. So we've got lower a number and how many that are divisible by 3 and 5. So let's say we put in 10 and 20. So low is 10, high is 20. We look at the number 10. What we're going to check about it? Is it divisible by 3? And what it means is like entirely divisible. It's just not, is it? You'll have a remainder. What about 5? Yes. But is it 3 and 5?
No.
11? No. 12? By 3 only, but not 5. 13?
Nope.
14?
Nope.
15?
Yes.
So 15 will be both divisible by 3 and 5, and therefore you'd say there's one number that's there. Or you could actually return the actual number itself. But let's say we've counted one that is divisible, and then 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 also won't do it. Right. Here's the question then. Using that division I just talked about, so using these ones here, how are you going to write some like function to say, is it exactly divisible by 3 and 5? How are you going to do that? Let's take that on board for a second. Let's review this one here. If we had 8 mod 4, my handwriting's getting catastrophically bad, my bad. 8 mod 4 is going to return what? 12 mod 4 is going to return, so in here, we're going to use mod 3 equals 0, whatever the number is, and, quite right, whatever the number is, mod 5 equals 0, and if they're both correct, that's when we have to do something, okay? So that's us thinking it through. So, let's kick off. What's the first, that was like towards the end, what's the first thing we need to do? Invite a user. It's a conversation, so the first thing we need to do is, so we need to store the outcome from this in a variable, so I'll have low, and then again, to get the value we do arrow point towards it, and the command would be I'm with you guys. I'm with you. So the next thing will be output. Please enter a high number, high, arrow pointing towards it, user input. So I'll do that now. Okay, guys. So that's low and high is taken care of. Now we need to use it. Question. If we put in 1 and we put in 20, we want it to evaluate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 20. Definite iteration or indefinite iteration? So we use what loop? For. So we do a for loop, and we have another thing to count. I actually literally call it count again. And what do we set it to at the beginning? Set it to low. And then what's next? 2, and then high. So in this case, if they put in 1 there, 100 there, count will be set to 1. And it got to 100, it'd be 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to count to 100, but you get the idea. Skip a few, 100. All right, and now we need to think about what's happening here. So we said this mod stuff. When you want to check for something, what function do we use? We use what kind of a statement? We use a if. So if what? If low, fine. If low what? No, we're on the way. Mod. Mod something. Mod what? Well, if you look up here, equals with a comparison, but we do single equals in pseudocode. We'll do the same thing. Mod 3, right? So first of all, we're checking if it's mod, if the number, not low, but we'll fix that in a second. We're not checking for low. What we're checking for as we're going along. Count, because count will be the one changing. So if you've written down low, you're going to get angry at me. Oh, and I can't delete. Oh, no. Probably should be, shouldn't it, actually? I mean, it does the same thing, but I'll do it. So it's count. Oh, I'm recording this whole thing. Oops. We've got something. Count mod 3. What about it? Equals. Thank you, Curtis. Equals 0. If it is equal to 0, what does that actually mean? It's exactly divisible by 3. What else do we care about? And what?
If count mod 5 equals 0.
I want you to appreciate, the other way you could have done that is you could have done another if statement nested inside it, and it would have done the same thing. Just worth pointing out. And count, go and talk it through with me. What do I need to do next? Count mod 5 equals 0. That's right, Curtis. Then sometimes it's worth, I'm not saying you have to do it right now, sometimes it's worth being clear. See the and is linking these two together. It would work fine, but you could if you wanted to put a bracket around there to really make it clear what the two, I'm not saying you have to, because I think it would work anyway, but that is. Yeah. Anyway, guys,
Can't do that when you're recording the TLV.
am I finished? We need to do something about this. What are we doing? Well, so I mean, if we wanted to figure out how many numbers, yeah, we do. We need another variable up here, actually up here. So I'll stick it right at the top here because it's a good idea to declare it. So right, what should we call the number? Num? I mean, a good answer would be like number divisible by 3 and 5, but I'm not writing that down. So I mean, that is exactly right. That's the spirit. I say n is too little effort. I'm going to make the effort of writing num. Or number. There you go. I mean, oh, look at that. Oof. And what do I initialize it to? 0. And then in here, what do we write down?
Then number equals number plus.
So, yeah, number becomes number plus... Well, quite finished. People had said it. So number, every time... Shh, guys. What are we going to do with number now that we found one? We'll add 1. Yep. Am I finished? I'll do end if. N4. I don't need to do an else, do I? Because if I haven't found it, I don't do anything. And then it's N4. And then what do I output at the end? Yeah, I output number. If I wanted to be... make it more presentable, I could string concatenate something on. So I could say, I'm going to make the real effort right now. there are plus, what would I plus? Numbers, or number, not numbers, sorry. Number divisible by 3. What am I doing? I could have written oh no, and 5. Anyway, what do you call this when you add a variable to a string? String concatenation. Okay, I had the conversation in class with you guys, so hopefully you remember that. So when you play this back, I know it's a bit confusing, but essentially the idea is you're asking the person to enter a year, and you're trying to establish whether that year is a leap year or not a leap year. So I started off with this thing here, because every 4 years means it could be a leap year, essentially. So if year mod 4 equals 0, and if that was all there was, you could say then output, it is a leap year, else it's not. But every 100 years, it isn't a leap year, unless it's every 400 years. So you need to think about how you're going to connect some other statements here, or maybe nest if statements. There's more than one way of doing this to try and get that solution. Okay, guys, so we're looking at our next question here. We're looking at the use of random, and we're looking at using diff, mod, and iteration. So this is another one that's going to loop around. And remember, the first thing you want to do is computational thinking, looking at our problem, looking at our question, and trying to figure out where is there variables, where is there action. So a user has a password, the big cheese. So the big cheese, in this case, will be a piece of data that we're going to make use of. Yeah, indeed, it will be data type string. Although in pseudocode, you don't need to declare data type. And maybe we say that the variable was like user password. Please ask the user for their password. So that's a function we need to do. So we need to ask the user for their password. Once we've asked the user for their password, so that's a different password, isn't it? We've got the user stored password, the big cheese, and then the person's going to enter their password. If they enter the correct password, please output the message. So if they enter it correct, correct password, please output the message, password correct. But if they enter the wrong password, output incorrect password, please try again. There is no limit on the number of attempts. Okay, definite iteration or indefinite iteration? Indefinite, because we don't know. They might get the password right first time, might get it around last time. Who's to say? And there are 2 different types of loops that we can see on the right here used for indefinite. There's repeat, until, and there's while, and then end while. With repeat, both of them rely on a logical test. So the test here will be, have they got the password right or not? With repeat, you will always run these statements once and then test them. In while, you test them and then run them. So for while, I'll need to have set this up, do something originally. So I'm going to use repeat until. So for this, when I ask the user for their password, the first thing I need to do is store what up here? Yeah, I need to store it, don't I? So the first thing I need to do is store that password, the big cheese. So I'll write that up first. So I've stored the value, the big cheese. And what I'll have to do is I'll have to ask the user, so output, please enter your password, and then I have to take it in. Now, the way I'm going to write it is I'm going to want to repeat that statement. So I'm going to use repeat. So the command or the loop is the repeat loop. And if you remember, the test for the repeat is at the end. So we will always run these first few lines. So what do I say I want to do? I want to do what for the user? I want to
Check if the password's correct.
So yeah, and so to check, first of all, I want to ask them it, don't I? So I need to output, and what will the question be?
What is the password?
Yeah, or please enter your password or whatever. So let's do that. Do you know what? This is an opportunity to talk about something. So here, I've used the variable password to store the big cheese. Now, I'm going to write out this, and you tell me, don't write this out yourself, this next line, okay? Tell me what you think the problem's going to be if I do this. So I'm using user input, and their input is stored in the variable password. What's going to be the problem of doing that? I agree with you guys completely. Since I've already used password, I'm using it to store the big cheese, it will just overwrite that. I want to compare this to the input, so I need to use a different variable.
You do if user input equals password.
Well, I mean, it's worth, maybe, absolutely, but maybe it's worth, I could store it temporarily and then do the comparison. And you said if, and I'm with you. That's how repeat does. It's like an if statement, but one that checks in a loop over and over again. So I could say, you said temp password. Fine, I could do that. So temp, p word. And then in here, yeah, that's my style. And then it's until, and like I just said, or rather like Mohammed was just saying, like he was saying if, and that's exactly right in the sense that you won't use the statement if, but you'd use a logical comparison. So until what is true, we want to keep on asking until what becomes true.
Period equals password.
Absolutely. So we need to keep going until temp password is, and what should I do for making it this to compare? Equals password. Because once it is equal to password, we do not want to make it loop anymore. And it's indefinite because if you get it wrong, it's going to go around. Now, there's one big boo-boo I've made, and you've written it down, and I've managed to, I'm going to really annoy you guys again. What is the big boo-boo I've done, Harry? What have I omitted? That's exactly right, Harry. So in here, if I get it wrong, it'll ask me, won't it, to enter it again, but it'll never say, incorrect password, please try this again. So this is a bit, I know that you love it when I do this, is I'm going to have to, but it's worth me doing this because this could easily happen in a real exam where you're like, oh no, I need to fit something in here. So my suggestion would be, well, so if we're evaluating here, we're going to need what in here to check to see whether to say it's a problem or not. We'll need probably need an if. If it's not correct, then output incorrect password. So what I would suggest you do is I just take a line like this and I push it like arrow like that, oops, but like good, not terrible like I just did. And then you can put the logic in there. So the idea is you know you need to put something in here, so you just take this and then you're pointing towards the logic that's going to be. So what's the logic going to be? It's going to be if, when will it be that we'll say that it's wrong? If what? Yes, if temp password is not equal to password. Yeah, so I'm saying I need to say, if they get it wrong, I need this message. And if I put it here, the problem is the first time it happens, it would always say incorrect password and then ask it for me, which would not be logically correct. So in here we're saying, if the temp password wasn't equal to password, then what do we say? We need to say, and we need to do exactly, thank you so much for saying that, we need to do exactly as they've asked you here. So the output needs to be exactly like that. Okay, so it's going to have this message here. If it is correct, we don't need to say anything, do we? So go in the loop. Am I finished? Because what's the other message? Now, you might want to say else here, correct password, but truthfully, what's the one condition where you can get to this line here at the end of the repeat loop? If it is correct. So I could put, what message could I put there? And then I could do output. And what's the message?
Correct.
There you go. We can say password. Yeah, thank you. Is correct.
So why would you have to tell them?
Also worth saying, what we're demonstrating here is something called validation or user authentication. So we're just checking to see if they're there. And obviously the end if they're. That's going to be so weird. I said end. I would have literally just said, let's move on. And then I've said this one here. Anyway, everything's fine. Move on to the next one. And then you'll hear me literally jabber on. And you're still hearing me jabber on. Jabber, jabber. This one is in two places, right? There's this algorithm here. So stage one of it. And then there's stage two. So I want you to like decompose it a bit by do it section by section. So write a pseudocode algorithm which asks a user to enter a number between 5 and 20. So you could do that, just output, user input. Here's the twist. If they enter a number outside the range, the program asks them repeatedly to re-enter the number. So you might be thinking if, so it could be like output, please enter a number. Number, arrow pointing towards it, user input. If number is greater than or equal to 5 and less than or equal to 20, then good. But how many times will an if check the answer? How many times will if I get it wrong,
Until it's correct.
but with an if statement, how many times will it do it? once. So we can't use if. What can we use? So we either repeat or while. I would say repeat. So I want to give you the opportunity to do that yourself. Think about how you're going to ask that question. You can look at the one you did before. Repeat, ask the question until what is true. We're recording. So the first thing we want to do is we want to ask the person to input a value. So I'm going to say output, and we're saying, please enter a number between what and what?
5 and 20.
Next thing I'd want to do is that I've asked that question. Next thing I want to do is let them
Input.
Absolutely. So we need a variable here. So we say, number or num. Arrow. Number will be absolutely fine. Num. Arrow pointing towards it. User input. How many times do we want to ask this question?
Indefinitely.
Indefinite until they actually ask between 5 and 20. So I'm going to use maybe if I use a repeat. So a repeat up here. So we're repeating all the things that are inside that loop until what becomes true.
Until numbers between 5 and 20.
So the way we'd have to write that is if num is greater than or equal to, that's exactly, till 5, and the number is less than or equal than 20. Okay? So it'll keep asking you in here. It won't say actually you got it wrong, but it doesn't say we had to say they got it wrong. It'll just say, let's say if I put 4, is 4 less than or equal to 5? 4 is not less than or equal, is not greater than, I said less than, didn't I? What an idiot. Is 4 greater than or equal to 5? No, false and true. You can do it the other way around. You could describe what you're not looking for. So you could say until num is less than 5 or greater than 20, or not that. So you can say what you're not looking for and keep asking it. But we're saying this way what we are looking for. Okay, so that's that first one actually done. Now let's look at the second part of the question. This is the second one here. Oh, in fact, let's pick a different colour. That would make sense, wouldn't it? There you go. This second one here. If you're reading it through, we've taken, once a valid number has been entered, so num is now valid, please allow the end user to enter n number of temperatures. So if I put 10, it's entering 10 temperatures, and then output the average temperature. How do you get an average? You add them all up, divided by the number of. So
Change your variable num to n in accordance with the question.
I suppose that's true, actually, yeah. Yeah, this is poorly asked. Again, I don't know what idiot did. I mean, it was me again, but, you know. So I'll have a new variable called total. And what will I initialize it to? 0. I want to show you some things where we're going to use a function here. Do you see? It's not actually available, but have you used... Oh, sorry. Actually, no, we know the number. It's going to be n. Now, the question is this a definite loop or an indefinite loop?
Indefinite.
It's definite because we know the number. So it started with indefinite, and now it's definite. Yep.
Would num be
Right now, so local variables is about subroutines. Because we're all inside the same bit of logic, I guess technically it's local, but it's also global because there's no subroutine here. And that's confusing. We will do subroutines later, though. So in here, once I got total, because we're going to then import, the user's going to enter all these values, but let's say put 10, it's going to go around 10 times. It's a definite loop. What do we use for definite loops? So 4, maybe I could say C, start at the value, I don't know, 0, and go up to what? To num. So, 0 is wrong, isn't it, as well? I should say 1.
So could you write it down? You might as well just put it all first and then write it down as a
It's making it annoying. Yeah, but you're not writing it down, so you're fine. So in here, C is going to start as 1, it's going to go to num. So if you've got 10, it would say 1, 2, 3 to 10. And every single time we go around, what do we need to do? So we can have total is equal to total plus what? No, what's where are we going to get the temperatures from? Who's going to give us the temperatures? So plus user input. I mean, ultimately, we could have used another space here.
You haven't asked them what you want them to input.
That is tragically awful.
You're going to have to insert another line.
Output. What's the question?
What enter a temperature.
Please enter a temp.
You can say temperature and then close it and put C as a variable and concatenate it.
That would be better, yeah. Please end.
That was such a big word.
But I've run out of space, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah. What's next? What's next? Concatenation, sticking things together, yeah. What's next? So, will I find the average inside the for loop, or will I have to wait for this for loop to end? End. So, I'll go N4, and then the average will be output. The average is total divided by what? So you add it all up and then divide it by... Thank you, guys. This one is now using the idea of arrays. A teacher wants to keep 3 scores for a student, 14, 20, and 15. I want to take a moment, because we haven't talked about arrays for a little while. Remember, arrays, all we're talking about is storing a sequence of variables, and you can imagine that it's in some box like this, and where we can be storing a bunch of different values. So I could be storing 9, 26, 3, 9, and instead of storing that as a variable 9, a variable for 22nd, 26, a variable for 3, and a variable for 9, and say they're all individual scores, we can say that this could just be one variable called scores, and then to access each of these boxes, it's got something else beginning with an I. Do you remember what it was called? An index. And the first box is at index position, then that's 1, 2, 3. So if I wanted to output what was in the box 3, how would I do this? So what's the name of the variable? Scores. It's an array. So what kind of brackets do we use? Square brackets or box brackets. It makes you feel better. What number would I put in there? 3. And that will allow us to access it. And we can use the opposite to make it store the value. Happy?
Yeah.
I know I'm saying this quick now. So we need to score 14, 20, and 15 and calculate an average. I've got an obsession about calculating averages. And at a later point, the student retakes the assessment. So first of all, let's store these things. So we've been given the values. We don't have to have the user input them. We can just store them. So they're scores. So let's call it scores. To assign something, what do we use to assign? Arrow pointing towards it. It's an array, so it's got a special thing. It's got these square brackets. 14, comma, that was root 20, that's exactly right, comma, 15. And that's it. We've stored these 3 variables in there. And then the next thing it says is calculate the average. Now, I could calculate the average by just saying total equals scores at position 0 plus scores at position 1 plus scores at position 2 and then divide it by 3. Let's say that there were 100 values inside this array. It would have to be total is scores at position 0 plus scores 1 plus scores 2 plus scores 3 plus scores 4. It's going to be a nightmare. Let's use a for loop to step through the array and add the values. So in the for loop, I'll say for. I'm going to actually use I, short for index. So what's the first index position at? 0. So 0. Now I'm going to do something that's a little bit more advanced. Well, first of all, I'm not going to. So I could say 2, couldn't I? Here. So 0 to 2. If I suddenly became 5 in the array, it'd have to change the number. If it was 6 in the array, it'd have to change the number. You can dynamically control the size of this thing. Do you see over here it says len identifier? Do you know what that does, the len command? Tells you how many items are in it. So if I run it here, if I said len, open brackets, and send it scores, what would that give me back?
How many variables?
So for this time, what would the number be? 3. Now, do we want to go from 0 to 3?
No.
Because we want to go 0, 1, and then 2. So minus 1. And now what it will mean is that every time you do this, as the array changes, the for loop will dynamically change with it. Neato. And then inside here, oh sugar, I should have done a note. So total, initialize that as being 0. And then in here, we can say total is total plus what? What do we want to add to it every single time? So what's the name of the array that's holding all these values? Scores. Whoops. And how do we access scores? Because it's an array. Box brackets, square brackets. And then what position do we need to add in?
I.
That's absolutely right. But let me do the silly thing first. If I say 0, if I put 0 in there, what is that going to actually do?
Keep inputting
14 on it, like,
Yeah, it's going to add 14 to itself, in this case 3 times. So what we want to do is put in that box I. And I will be that the first time around, it's going to be, this time it's going to be 0, then it'll be 1, and then it'll be 2, and it'll add it to the total. Do we need to do anything else in this for loop? No, end for. We want to calculate the average. How do we calculate the average? And we can use the len command again. How can we use the len command? So it's total. Yeah, divide. So how are we going to use the len command? We can go len. There you go. And this time we don't have to do -1 because we actually do want the total that's in there. So len scores is going to give us the total number there. In this case, it will be 3. And that would be the average. So I could say output. And then the average is... The average is, and what will I do now? Well, I want to stick it on the edge. What do I do to stick it on the edge? Plus, and then AVG sticks it on the end there, and then bracket. Am I finished? At a later point, this is like a story or something. The student retakes an assessment and now scores 18. So in this thing here, it's 18 rather than 14. How do I change the value in there to 18? So what's the name of the array? Scores. It's an array, so what do I use? And then where is 14 stored? Position 0. And then what do I assign in that box now? 18. There you go. Wonderful. Guys, this is for you. I'm obsessed by averages, apparently. I don't know why. A student wants to input their 3 test scores themselves. So the only tweak this time is that you're not assigning the test scores. The person's inputting their test scores. Yes? That's the tweak. So it has to be a loop where you have to let them input their test scores, calculate the total, calculate the average. Okay, guys, so we want to input their test scores themselves. So what we're going to want to do is we don't actually need to initialize. In code, we'd have to initialize an array. This one, for whatever reason, it's not really down here as a thing. I suppose you could say that we could initialize an array with 3 spaces. So I could just go, for instance, scores, and then initialize it with, in square brackets, 0, 0, 0, and then I guess initialize it that way. And then I could say for and I could initialize total as being 0, I think, as well here. And it says I start it at what position because it's an array? 0, going up to where? Yeah, but this time we don't want to do 2. Do you remember what was the new thing we were learning about? Len of
Scores -1.
Scores, and you're quite right, -1, -1, and then as we go through the array, we'll go to scores, square brackets, at position, what position? I. So starting at 0, moving its way moving its way across. What do we need to stick into there as we go along?
Use your input.
What have I missed out? Yep.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? 1 second. I'm gonna do something that's gonna really annoy you guys. So just use your tool that's on your book that allows you to just move things around.
Basically, cut it out and then stick it back on.
I love how you even cut out like square brackets around the eye.
That's authentic. Please enter score. Oh, and here, maybe I could do, because I've got space now, plus I plus 1. Why am I going to do that? Or why would we need to do that? Yeah, exactly. And this way, concatenating it, I'm asking for a specific score. I think it probably helps with the... And then it depends how lazy I want to be. And I'm me, so pretty lazy. So, hey, guys, come on. I recorded that. I really did as well. So I could total it in the same array, in the same for loop, couldn't I? I don't need to have a separate for loop to do it. So I can say total is total plus what?
Scores I.
Scores I. There you go. At position I. And then at the end, to calculate the average. How are we doing for time? Yep. Okay, output. And then the question would be, and I can say the average is, God, I really am obsessed by averages though. If on the exam there's no questions about averages, as in like the real exam at the end, you'd be like, why did you make us do so many averages? But it's quite a common question. Yeah, exactly. That's so true. Yeah, the average is, it's just such a go-to thing. Anyway, so how are we going to do this? We'll say total, and then how are we going to calculate it? Divide it by...
Len.
Yeah, len. Do you remember that's a new thing we learnt about? Len scores.
Len's doing a lot of work here.
Len is a good man. A 10 from Len.
Absolutely love.
Okay, so let's look at this problem here. If we remember, we're trying to use sort of computational thinking by decomposing ideas and abstracting the crucial information. And one of the things we did is that we looked for variables, actions, and sort of values that we were going to use. So I'm going to read this problem here. A teacher wants to keep the scores for a student. Do you see any variables we might need to be keeping? I agree with you. We need the number of scores we want to do. The number of scores can vary. So they're going to say that they might need to record 5 scores for a student or 10 scores. We don't know at this point. Please allow the teacher to input the number of tests taken. So the number of tests. So allow the input, the number, allow the teacher to input. So we need to ask the question. They can then input that value back. The number of tests taken. So maybe that's another variable, the number of tests taken. And then allow the teacher the opportunity to input each of these scores. So then they need to actually input each of those scores. Each of these scores. So this is the same scores from up here. This is the same variable. And at the end, we need to output the average. Now, the average you might calculate as a variable, or you might choose to just calculate it and send it. So essentially, we're saying that a teacher wants to keep a certain number of scores. It doesn't say it explicitly, and that is my fault, but they want to store it. They're having a collection of scores together. What do you reckon they use to have a collection of things? They'll use a array. Agree with you completely. So in this case, let's say because we can't really declare an array. Let's just say we've got scores, and that is the array. And then lower down, and then you say, let's say I want to input 10 tests. So I pick 10 tests. And then we're going to input each of those scores. I know it's going to go around 10 times, so I'll use what kind of a loop? Definite loop, which would be a for loop. So I'd ask those 10 times, and then in the square brackets for scores, you might use, well, I don't know what you're going to use in your loop, but and then first time around you score it in 0, and then 1, and then 2. So let's just take a moment. We'll have to output the question, and what would the question we'll have to ask the user at the beginning? Yeah, asking the teacher, how many scores do you want to keep? And then we'll have to record that in here. So the number or number of tests taken, depends how long we make it, record it. Then the for loop will go around. What's the first index in an array? What position? 0. So it'll go from 0 up to the number of tests taken. But let's say they want to do 5 tests.
0.4.
Yeah, so number of tests taken minus,
1.
and then allow them to input it like this, scores I as it goes along. If you want to calculate an average, we'll also need another variable, won't we, to keep track of it? Total, initialize at 0. In the for loop, you're going to keep adding to it. At the end of a for loop, output the average by calculating the total divided by the number of tests taken. People, so that kicks us off. We're setting a total to be 0. We're asking the question how many tests are taken, and then we're getting the person to doing it, and we're storing it in this value called number. Now we want to allow the person to input these tests. Let's say they put in 10 tests. What am I going to use to go around and ask that? A for loop, because it's definite, isn't it? So it'll be for loop. Going at scores, and it's an array, so we use...
Square bracket.
Sure do. And we're not going to want to put down 0, are we? What do we want to put in there? I. So it's going to be at position 0, and then going up to whatever the number is minus 1. At every... Oh! I need to ask, don't I? Don't I? I need to ask the question. Oh. I will do you a solid, and I will do this, an arrow going over here, because these things happen, and they could easily happen in a test.
This has happened like every single question.
I've done this to give you additional experience.
This video is getting shocking.
Please. What's the question? Please, yeah, well, this is, yeah, please enter score 1, score 2. In fact, do you know what?
Score I.
I'm going to make it better. Yes. I don't want to just say, please enter the test, because maybe they're entering 20 tests. Wouldn't it be better if it said, please enter test 1. Please enter test 2. So let's do that. So in here, please enter test number plus. Now, if I put in just I, that's not going to quite work for us. Do you know why it's not going to quite work for us? Because it's going to start at 0. Now, we know 0 is the first place in an array, but if I'm asking a human being, please put in your first test, that'd be test number 1. And I'm completely with you. So what we need to do with this is we need to go plus 1.
Wait, what's that thing outside the brackets?
It's like a plus, which is kind of a cross. Let me tidy it up. Oh, no, I can't tidy it up, so I've given up. Oh, maybe this time? No, still can't work. Anyway, scores, and then at that position, what do we put in? We want the person to do what? User input. User input we want to put in here. We need to update also what? We want to make an average, so we'll have to update what? So total. And remember, we'll have to add total to itself, otherwise we'll keep doing it. It will keep doing it. Plus what? What do we have to add to total every single time?
Score I.
Scores at position I with the square brackets. I. And then this will keep running through until the array is full of values and the total is updated. So do we need anything else in the for loop? Nope. So we can go M4. And then what did we want to do in the end? Let's take a moment to think what was the actual point of all this? Average. So we'll go output. Well, I'm going to say the average is, and then I'm going to stick on the end of this the actual average. So the average is speech marks plus. How are we going to get the average then? Go on. Faraz, you going for it? Total divided by the number of tests. Or in my case, it just says number, because I'm a little bit lazy. Beautiful. Oops. Right, let's do this. So subroutines. Subroutines, if you remember, are when you take chunks of code and you try to develop them for particular functions. So it often marries up well with decomposition. When you have a big idea, you break it into smaller ideas, and then you write subroutines for it. In this case, it's doing something for calculating, for some kind of train company. And one of the subroutines is to be able to generate and calculate, well, what do you suppose that's going to be? Rail fares. So the name of the subroutine, the identifier is rail fare. It's got these 3 things coming in. Do you know what those are called? Beginning with P? Parameter values. It's got 3 parameter values. So it's got 3 inputs that can come into rail fare. And it does all this calculation. And then the other thing I just want to draw your attention to, in fact, why don't I do it here? So it's got that input, and that input. And at the end, it's got return rail fare, so that would be what's returned out of it. And we don't need to actually write a subroutine here. We just need to be able to follow the subroutine. And it says the following subroutine calculates the rail fare. It has to take in the distance travelled, and it has a discount of 10% if it's for off-peak. So whether it's going to be under main part of the day or not. Down here, I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is it being called rail fare and sent the values. So in this case, 4 would be the distance. Monday, speech marks Monday, would be the day, and 8.00 is the time. So what it's asking us is to look at these 3 different values, plug it into here, and then say what the result's going to be. So the first time, distance is, what was distance? 4. Day was, and time is 8. So you know what, I'm going to write actually out for A here, I'm going to actually record those results. On here, now we've got distance is 4, we can view here. So if distance is less than 5, is distance less than 5?
Yes.
So we can go in here. Rail fare is set to 3. Now because we've got this if, do we do the else? No. Oh, and I see what you mean. We've got this, I think that else should be here. So that, because the nesting is really messed up, I think that should be here. So that should be the if and else for this. And then end if. So currently rail fare is what? Wicked. Is the day Saturday or the day Sunday? No. Else. Is the time greater than 10 and less than 16? It is less than 16, but it's not greater than 10, so we don't do that. So what was the thing in the end? So return rail fare, so we'd return
3.
Yeah. So return, in fact, maybe I should say rail fare. Rail fare is 3.00. For B, we've got distance, day, time. So what is the distance for B?
15.
Abdali, what's the day for this one?
Saturday.
There you go. And
The time is for 2.
time is 14. There's a teachable moment here that I haven't talked about, but distance, what data type do you reckon that is? Integer, because it's a whole number. Saturday, string, and this one here, real number. In fact, actually, distance is integer, day is string, and time is real number. Let's evaluate it then. Is distance less than 5? No. So we go to this else. Is the distance less than 12?
No.
So we'll go to this else here. You can see how important it is to nest properly, because otherwise it makes it really confusing to watch. So rail fare is what? 5. So we've got rail fare is 5. Is day Saturday or Sunday? So this is, what's that going to do? Rail fare times by 0.9, taking 10% off. So 10% off 5 is going to give you, I'm going to write it down in case I forget this along the way. So if we've got 4.50 so far. And then if time is greater than 10, is it greater than or equal to 10?
No, so it's that if not indented.
Oh, sorry, this should be indented as well. Yeah, this is really not ideal. So yeah, this should be in here. Yeah, so we've got end if, and so then in case rail fare is that. Yeah. Yes, so you're right, Ethan, because if it's a real number, it wouldn't include that value there. However, it could be formatted, in this case, currency is sometimes a data type. It's not a pure data type, and it could be using currency as a thing. And that way, it always preserves 2 decimal places.
So that's an unclear question.
Well, yeah. Well, in a few, this exhibit A of unclear question. Don't worry, it's only an exam question. Nothing to worry about. C. So let's do the last one and get the values. Okay, let's review this. And distance is 8. Is that less than 5? No. So we go to the else. Is the distance less than 12?
Yes.
Yes. So rail fare is 4.00. And if day is Saturday or Sunday? No. Is time greater than or equal to 10?
No.
Is it less than 16? No. So rail fare was 40 because it never changed down here. So rail fare is 4.0.